The protagonist was a powerful farmer, but he ended up being transported to another world and was found inside a cave that he later discovers was a portal. After leaving that portal, he heads to a city and there he has some difficulties to adapt to his new life, since it was a totally different world. He even confuses a motorcycle with a wild boar called Bergie, and as if that were not enough, he confuses a vase with a hairdryer. That's all. That's what's fashionable today. So leave a like, subscribe to the channel there because this manga is very cool, okay? The manga starts with a man talking on the phone, making fun of someone and saying that if he asked his boss for a raise, he would increase his salary, but he notices a man walking next to him and that man's hair was very long. He wondered why there was a beggar there. That's the protagonist, isn't it? He knew where he was and wondered if he was on Earth, recognizing the air and all those noises from the city so loud that they could even burst your ears. He says that this was not the empire K came from. He says in his thoughts that he did not know where he was, but one thing he knew, it was not an illusion since this feeling was really vivid. While he was thinking about these things, people wondered why he had a person, or in this case, a beggar standing there, and the protagonist thought that first he would have to find out what kind of place this was to which he had appeared, but he began to get stressed by the noise that surrounded him. The Emperor of the Flame was a very strong man and had no mercy. He managed to adopt the form of a human, but his condition was obviously not human, and wherever he went there were only screams and blood. He remained in his place and no one dared to follow in his footsteps, since he was none other than the god of death. He had eliminated the absolute leader of the dark path of murim to which he belonged. He had also submitted to the heavenly demonic sect that was linked to him. After all these events, he was revered as the pinnacle among all martial artists, even the good or bad artists, and ended up being known as the god of martial arts. The short scene with a man looking at a city, he was very calm. He said that the days of his past now seemed like a dream, since he used to think that life could never escape violence and killing. He ends up remembering a girl who caught his attention. All happy, he asked her if those flower petals were not beautiful, but he told her that he did not know and asked her that they saw those wild flowers scattered everywhere, but the girl ends up blushing. For what he said that joy is that feeling where you worry and laugh even when there is nothing special, and he said that a day would come when he would realize this. That is why he was sharing his joy at that moment and ended up giving her a flower. At that moment, he held one of those flowers, remembering that she said that when he met him he became a person who could cry and laugh, and he said that it was a surprise that joy came from such a chaotic life. At that moment, he wondered what he would do now that she had found his happiness. He seriously wondered if he should also look for his happiness like her, and he wondered if he would not have to be so crazy to find this feeling that she explained between laughter and tears, and closing his eyes, he thought about this life of happiness and a strange energy appears, a swirl of petals, and the protagonist begins to wake up. He did not know and had no idea where he was simply sitting inside a cave. Remember that he was in the middle of ascending to immortality, but at that moment he did not know what had happened. He wondered if he could have been attacked by an illusion, or something like that, but he said that in any way he should focus only on getting out of there. While he was standing up, he thought that he should evaluate the situation he finds himself, but as standing up a monster appears behind him. The city was completely destroyed and a red portal appears. People warn the Alpha team to enter the portal, and this communicator tells them that if they find any suspicious activity, they report it immediately and continue with their recognition mission with the aim of a safe return. Good luck to the Alpha team, which begins to enter the portal and sees that it is a cave. One of the men says that it is very suspicious, that it is a class portal but it is very silent inside. The other says that he probably only slept in a Class A dungeon. There are monsters with significant intelligence and are more dangerous than those in Class B. Obviously, and that boy was talking about an incident that happened 5 years ago when the guard of Team Zero fell due to a similar situation. They were totally annihilated because they met a horde of monsters gathered in the depths of the portal. His other partner apologizes, but suddenly someone shouts at them not to move. That man says he does not feel the presence and wonders how and when he appeared. It was quite crazy that a class monster S was hiding as if he had totally killed one of the men, who begins to stammer in fear calling the team. But he simply ignores it. There was a gold giant, and that boy was very amazed by the size of the hole in the belly of that monster. They report to the center saying that this was the Alpha team and that they found several Class B Cyclops corpses and Class B magic beasts inside the cave, but they were all completely lifeless. He says that they will inform all the details after the mission. The other man from before tells the team leader that Bragefiend had finished the job and the team leader said it was great. Luru wondered what had happened to those monsters and asks the team leader if it could have been an internal field. He didn't know it was that, but finally the team leader said there was no way, it couldn't be that, since the Cyclops would already be injured. He said that, in addition to them, only another guild could have seen that place, and the team leader wondered if there could be a guild in South Korea that could complete the class dungeon as if it were nothing without anyone realizing it. Meanwhile, the protagonist was leaving and wondering what kind of place he was in. The protagonist said that after opening his eyes, he was in a cave full of monsters and had never seen those monsters before. He wondered why those monsters that he defeated in one blow went to him as if they were trusted, but he said that he managed to get out anyway. He founds the exit, but it was in the middle of nowhere, and asks himself if that place was like some ruins. He ends up finding a skeleton near an instructor. He puts on the skeleton's clothes and says that he has ended up in a completely unknown place again. All he could see were abandoned, damaged, and ruined structures. Also, he didn't feel any sign of life or movement around him. He says that in the past he had to face the fans of the heavenly demonic cult. Those magicians tried to use magic considered forbidden in magic society, and the power he felt then was strangely similar to that of that moment. Although he can currently dissipate that dark magic, he cannot use his abilities with precision in an unknown place, which was very dangerous for him. He thinks that first he should leave that place and says that he will only go in the direction where he can feel less of that demonic energy. He runs away, and as he moves away, the portal continues there. The scene changes to a restaurant. On television, a guy was showing and reporting that the Korean Awakenings Association has not taken a clear position regarding that incident of the portal. In the United States and in China, where the Awakenings of Level 0 woke up, there were discussions about that portal. A boy raises his hand asking when they would serve him the portion of pasta and black beans. Wow, black beans are very good, C is crazy. A woman arrives, she was the vice president, I will call her So Young, asks them to have good meals, and the other thanks an unknown man. He ends up arriving and she receives him. He says that he had not been there for a long time. That strange man ends up greeting and asks for a plate of pasta with black beans. He was the leader of the Awakenings Association called Beck. The woman says that he seems very tired and asks him if he is okay. He asks him if he has heard the news. Another portal has appeared in the land of death. He says they are dying while they try to mediate between the guilds that discuss the monopoly of that portal, and says that as everyone is trying to monopolize that portal, everything is getting out of control, in total chaos due to the fights. Everyone is going crazy to get that portal, along with the magic stones and even a significant increase in accidents within the portals of that day. The cook ends up asking if there are more portals appearing. The guy says that for people like them, they could benefit from an increase in the offer of magic stones, causing their prices to fall. The cook says that the constant appearance of magical beasts is terrifying, and he says that they seem to be losing customers due to the appearance of the portals. But the guy makes a joke saying that no one would leave his house at a time like this. But a box probably made of napkins ends up falling to the ground, and a guy seems quite nervous, saying that he would not live like that. He shows his cell phone and says that there is another portal that can no longer live like this. The cook tries to calm him down by saying that there are still customers in that place, so he needs to calm down. In addition, they had also doubled his salary the last time, so he was supposed to behave. So that's what the guy was referring to by making fun of him on the phone, right? The guy asks if he really believes that his life can only improve. If that is the case, he says that since he cannot at least scream a little, it is time to increase his salary again. Or if not, at least he should find someone new to do it for him. But then the guy wants a good life, too much, and, C, the cook and owner of the store, asks how he could do that and suddenly asks him to be understanding and think about his situation. But the annoying guy asks how he could not understand, since he was risking his life employing another person. The cook arrives with the other girl, who I think is his wife, and says that it was time to be with his little girl. He says that they would pick her up. At that moment, he said that he should go quickly just so that he would not be late. She said that she understood and left quickly, and they explained to us that due to the portals, people were anxious and very scared. The residents were leaving that neighborhood, and that is why it became even more difficult to hire someone, since that employee was the only one they had managed to get, and that annoying guy thought that he had finally found a good place and had established himself, so he could not simply leave. On the other side was the protagonist, who said that that world was definitely different from where he had lived, but there were some similarities. He said that there were some people with very similar internal energy to that of his world. Look back and see the woman in the restaurant with her little daughter. She said that it was mainly that girl who had a very similar energy, even familiar. Her energy was very pure that clearly distinguished her from other people. She even found it very strange because her energy was really pure and wondered if that girl knew something. But while they were walking, a strong gust of wind ended up hitting them. The girl realizes that her bunny diadem had flown away with that strong wind. She wanted to go, but her mother told her not to go because it was very dangerous. But even so, she did not listen to the woman because she said it was a gift from her father. But fortunately, she manages to recover it. She ends up taking it and says that she managed to get it. But without her realizing it, there was a high-speed truck that was heading in her direction. But before something happened to the girl, the protagonist manages to catch her quickly. After that, he looks at her and asks her if she is okay. He says that it was very dangerous. She ends up running towards her mother, and her mother was very relieved to have her daughter back. After a while, she began to thank the protagonist. She really did not know what to tell him. But the protagonist says that everything is fine and that he does not need anything. It was great. The protagonist says that as he introduced energy to block the nerves in his body, he believes that the girl would be safe. Another person asks if the protagonist was not injured. She said that since they could not be sure of that, she asks him why they did not go to the hospital together. Although the protagonist refused, and the girl with her mother would realize that the protagonist was really resistant because he was intact even if he looked a bit like a beggar, and the protagonist said that thinking about it, well, he was a little hungry and the last time he ate was a long time ago. He thought about the cake that he ate immediately before arriving at that place, but his thoughts are interrupted by a little girl who ends up calling him throwing his clothes away. She explained that her father was a chef and it was only the two of them to go eat together. Her mother agrees and invites him to eat at the restaurant. She says that at least they could do that to pay him in some way since he saved his daughter. The protagonist said that everything was fine, just something he had to do. He had not done anything to get a reward, so they did not need to worry about him. But his belly said something else because it made a noise. But in the end, he ends up accepting after the girl's parents found out. He was quite scared. Who would not be, right? He ends up going to her and asks her if she was really okay and if she was not hurt in any way. He is completely desperate, but she says that everything was fine. The girl was good thanks to him and has to not be worried. His wife says that he saved the girl. The father starts crying and says that he is very grateful for helping and saving his daughter. He said that he could offer as many meals as he wanted, so please go in, while he was holding the protagonist's hand. His daughter said that her father said that he could not get dirty while he was eating, and the protagonist pulls off his shirt and really notes that he is a little really dirty. His father ends up saying that he could wash and bathe while he prepares his food, and the protagonist says that he will accept it and that it will not be any inconvenience. After a while, he gives the prota some clothes to use them since his were totally dirty and broken. He said that those clothes did not fit him well after he has gained a little weight and how they are similar in height. Before, those clothes could fit him very well. He begins to look for some socks to give to the protagonist, and the protagonist asks if that was a bathroom because all the rooms have shiny sides. But he wonders where the bracelet was. He looks at the vase and looks at it. He wonders if it was a well. The protagonist ends up calling the owner of the house. He ends up apologizing for calling, but he said that there was not enough in that well. But the boss really does not understand it. He asks him what well he is talking about. He ends up showing it and says that it was that in this case. He says that there was a few water and it was not a well. It was a vase, but obviously the protagonist does not understand very well and asks if he was referring to the place where you wash your hands, but it was also the tap water. But both are different. He said that if he wanted to shower, all he had to do was turn the lever to let the water out of that tap. The protagonist ends up opening it, but it opens very strong and the hose stays out of control, coming out wetting everything, and the protagonist continues to ask how there was a snake spilling water in that place, but he explains that it was not a snake. It was simply the shower. After a while, the protagonist was completely clean. But the one who was tired was the owner of the house. Look how the owner of the house was. He ends up calling the protagonist and ends up apologizing for the question he was going to ask, but he ends up asking where the protagonist is from since it was the first time he saw a bathroom. Apparently the protagonist had no idea how to explain his situation, and in the end he explains that he had simply lost his memory. The guy was brilliant at that. The protagonist explains that he had not completely lost all his memories, but he did not know how he got there and he did not know where he lived. So that was his case, and the owner of the house was a little moved by his story. He said that that's why he was dressed that way, and they end up saying that it looked like the cave where he came from was a portal. They said something jokingly and they got it right, but the protagonist did not know what type the cave was and asks what a portal is. They explain that they are spaces that suddenly appear, and to this day they do not know exactly what they are. They are only spaces and they are like a portal where things appear and disappear quickly, and occasionally there are people who are affected by the portal and lose their memories. They end up being isolated before returning. They continue to explain that in serious cases they lose all existing memories and also lose the meaning of civilization, and that is why they call those who are trapped and become shareholders. But he said that anyway, I would explain it in more detail later, and first they had to eat before the food cooled down. Of course, he looks at the food and wonders how he had made that food for him. That color did not seem to be a very safe food. He said that when he looked at that food he remembered his aquatic training that he received when he was young. He said that in that moment to survive he struggled a little drinking water from the swamp that was contaminated with blood and dirt. The girl with a dirty mouth asks the Proto why he was not eating and if he did not like noodles with black beans. The protagonist asks what type of food was the one that he did not know how to eat that food. She ends up teaching him that he just had to turn it and mix everything, and she ends up lifting those noodles and her parents tell her that she had to say please eat it. The protagonist ends up trying that food and realizes that that food was legendary. It was very delicious. He said that the appearance was a bit strange, but the flavor was incredible. He had never been able to experience a flavor like that anywhere. The guy said he wanted to give him something better, but he only had that ingredient, and his mother, the girl, said that next time they would offer something better for the protagonist, but few knew that that was the best that the protagonist had in his life, and said that they did not need just another cup of that. It was enough, and the girl begins to make fun of the protagonist because he also had a dirty mouth. The protagonist ends up thanking them at the end too because thanks to him, but they say it was nothing, and if he wants the food again, he just had to go to that store at any time in history, but there was something that protected him. Interested, he wondered what that sign meant on the front door of the store. You need a partial time distributor. They said that it meant that they were looking for people who could make deliveries for them, and the workers who got they asked for unreasonable salaries. And out of concern if they were trying to recruit new members urgently, the protagonist asked if someone had delivered. It meant that he could also get accommodation and food. They explained that if since almost no one wanted to work there, the Prota begins to think that he needed a place to stay before returning to his original world, and this was not a good time to be out on the street. If he got to start working there, he could learn to live in that world. The protagonist asked if he can accept that job. He would be really grateful, but said that the Proto was an isolationist and legal procedures are strictly prohibited for people like him. But his wife said that he was the person who saved his daughter, so they could finally help him in this way. She said that she had heard that there is a way for citizens to become guarantors of applicants, said that it was a predestined relationship, and wondered why they did not guarantee their identity and hired him as a distributor. The girl said that she liked that idea, and the girl's father said that it was that there was that method, and ends up accepting. He said that it would be his guarantee. Man, I'm reading the wrong translation. This guarantor, in this case, is responsible for it, just so as not to be out of context. The protagonist obviously ends up thanking him and said that he would do his best in that job, and the girl's parents were very happy. The protagonist introduces himself as Kanasuyu. He is 35 years old, and don't think they weren't surprised because they almost made her jump knowing that the protagonist was 35 years old, and he realized that the protagonist was the same age as Lipero. The protagonist was much younger. He introduces himself as Yanti Atsai and said that since they were both the same age, they only had to speak formally, and after that they ended up shaking hands. The protagonist ends up remembering a girl who asked him if that could be her name. Kanasuyu said it was the name he created with the hope that she would always smile like that. But the protagonist told that girl that he didn't have the talent to name someone, and the girl said that that name was very beautiful and gave him a big smile. The meaning of Kanasuyu, and the protagonist ends up accepting that name. Kanasuyu told him that he would use the same name he gave him, and after a while the protagonist was in the room, probably while he was cultivating. He said that there was pure energy around him and said that there were so many things there that he couldn't even imagine where he lived. He said it was a really magical place, but a door opens behind him and it was the owner of the house. The protagonist ends up saying good morning, and the owner of the restaurant asks him what he was doing with the lights off. The protagonist said that he was only there because there were no candles, and the owner of the house realizes that he also had to explain how to turn on the lights in the house since he didn't even know it was a vase, right? And just after that he ends up showing it. He said he had to press the button and the lights would turn on. The protagonist found that very interesting, and the wife of the owner of the house ends up appearing. She is surprised that the protagonist woke up really early. He ends up saying good morning to the protagonist, and the protagonist, noticing that he was wearing that apron, asks him if he was going to start cooking at that time of day. The guy said no, but that they should prepare for business because they had many things to do, and the protagonist was sitting while the two of them were talking in the kitchen. Suddenly the protagonist calls Sunai's attention. He asks him if there is something that can also help, but he said he would not need help. He would need to rest a little more and begins to apologize for doing other things in addition to the delivery job. But the protagonist said that he really didn't care and just wanted to return the kindness they showed him. Sunai then asked him if he could ask the protagonist to clean. After a while he was explaining to the protagonist that it would be easier there if he used the vacuum cleaner. Explaining that it was a machine that cleaned the dust by suctioning air while pressing the power button or hanging it. While he continued to explain that he could simply push it like a mop, similar to the one he had in his hand, it was not difficult, but while he said it he was fighting with the vacuum cleaner. Sunai was already happy to say that the protagonist was helping them many times, but was scared to see that the protagonist was almost being defeated by the vacuum cleaner. He ends up asking if the protagonist was okay. In this case, he ends up confirming it. He said that although that vacuum cleaner was old, its power to suck air was very strong, so he should be careful. And he ends up asking if the protagonist thought he could really take care of this lesson. But the protagonist said that he would understand after a while. Sunai ends up leaving this lesson with the protagonist. The protagonist looks at that vacuum cleaner. He was thinking that he had to clean it, but it seemed very dangerous to him. He wondered if he should use a little of his power. He press his hand and then look up, holding his hands above. All the dust that had accumulated ends up becoming a ball and then throws it into the bucket. Then he takes the water and begins to clean the whole place. All that water is cleaning every corner of that house, and when Sunai was returning, everything was shining, and before he realized it, the water was already returning to the bucket. The protagonist said it was great. Sunai ended up calling the protagonist attention, and the protagonist ends up saying that he had just cleaned it his way and asks what he thought of that job. He asks what the protagonist did so fast, so he was really surprised. The protagonist asks what he is saying, if it is about the fact that he controlled the water, but he said it was not that, and ends up asking if the protagonist was a high-level awakening. But the protagonist did not know what that was and ended up asking about it and explained that they were people who had demonstrated some skills since the first portal opened 25 years ago. He said that it was also common to call it an aura and it could manifest in the powerful kinesis. In addition, it also had some elemental abilities, and depending on how competent they were to control this aura, it could also be divided into degrees, and depending on the degree, this power and how it was treated could be variable. So he said that the protagonist probably worked in one of these portal care classes. He said that only an awakening could treat such a powerful aura. He is competent and said it was a waste for him to work in that store. It was better for him to join a guild and live like a hunter, and it was also more comfortable. But the protagonist draws his attention. He said he had no plans to become that thing he calls a hunter, and Sunai logically does not understand why he was saying that. He tries to explain to the protagonist that he did not know that local person. A high-level awakening is no different from a noble. The protagonist says that if it is something like that, he does not want to become. Also, he said he enjoyed a lot of wealth and honors, but he realized too late how ephemeral he was. Sunai ended up asking if the protagonist had recovered. He said he had not recovered his memories, but being honest, he lived in a different world from that place. But one day, when he woke up, he found himself in the middle of that portal that he had mentioned after escaping from it. He reached that area in search of pure energy and accidentally saved that girl who was almost run over by that truck. He says iron car, but it was a truck. Okay, and Sunai understood everything. The protagonist was saying that he did not plan. He deceived him and ended up apologizing, thinking that he should have told the truth from the beginning. But Sunai ends up grabbing his shoulder and tells him that the protagonist has gone too far and it must have been difficult to fall in a place completely unknown like that. The protagonist asks if he really believed in him, and Sam asks why he would not believe. He would also have saved his breath in this type of situation. But Sunai said that it was better to maintain his identity as an isolationist precaution, and said that regarding being verified as awake, it was for him to think carefully about this situation, because he said that his life could be quite difficult than he thought. The scene cuts to a giant building, where a male protagonist is sleeping until a woman arrives and shouts his name, Sung Jinho. Obviously he wakes up startled, asking what had happened, and if something was wrong, but she notices the protagonist that was passing through there. She said that the man who had just passed seemed to be emitting an incredible aura. She assures that he had not felt anything until moments ago, but at that moment he had felt something coming from him. At that moment, the protagonist was with the girl, and the woman continues to say that it seemed as if she had detected his ability to detect aura, but it emitted such a tremendous energy that in an instant it seemed sinister to him. She asked if it was possible to hide the energy so fast, because if she is not wrong, that man was high class. It could even be compared to the awakening of Class 0 and maybe even the person that the association was looking for, but his thoughts were interrupted by the hero. The girl's mother told him that her order of 2 plates of noodles with black bean sauce and a generous portion of pork, sweets and cupcakes, all on behalf of the house, was ready. She ends up leaving and wishing them a good meal. The girl was looking at the protagonist and thanked him, while her brother also thanked her for being like that. He said he would enjoy it and asked his sister if he thought it was delicious. She said it actually looked very good, started trying and said it looked like she was a little irritated because she was hungry and maybe all she thought was just her imagination. A level 0 awakening among those places. What was the probability, right? Well, yes, it was the indicated, but she ends up calling her brother suddenly asking if he was cheating on her, but obviously he did not understand what she was trying to say. What she meant was that he had not taken her to that place before and from that day that place became the god of noodles. He said it was really delicious and his brother obviously relieved that he would have liked that place so much. She said that the noodles with black bean sauce should not be this delicious. The protagonist was looking at her at that moment. The protagonist realizes that there is someone with an exceptional sense of energy in that place. He also noticed that both had a slightly different energy, but both had the caliber of a master and their own rank in the ancient world. The protagonist continues saying that they could be those known as awakened in that world. He really should be aware because he did not know if they can detect his energy. In addition, he also wanted to investigate these awakens more thoroughly. After a while, he was cleaning the whole place. He said that he was not yet satisfied, but it was much cleaner than before. He had not yet fully accustomed to that life in that place, but he was learning a lot from the couple of Sunai and Jan. He ends up remembering all the fun experiences he had there, but there were still many things that he did not know. Although he could learn them slowly at his own pace, there was no need for him to be so impatient, but he should also verify and investigate these awakens more thoroughly. But he notices something, a motorcycle. He wonders where that noise comes from. Ah, I forgot that he does not know that it is a motorcycle. Suddenly,